Subchapter 3.5. A recovered slave once said, "Your life ends the moment they lay hands on you. The first thing they do is inject you with nanobots that hunt down and destroy any communication implants that might be in your body. They strip you of your identity. They take your clothes, any possessions you might have on you, anything that linked you to your former life. Then they lock you up in a big holding cell, naked, with a bunch of other people. If anyone resists, they're singled out and beaten. They're beaten until they can't put up a fight anymore. If anyone protests, they're beaten. If anyone asks a question, they're beaten. They drill it into you. You are no longer who you were. You are who they say you are. From this day on, your existence is to be bought and sold, serve your masters and obey. Your life belongs to them." By the time the slaves were transferred to one of the many auction houses on Dukas, the newly acquired slaves had become more or less compliant. They were given simple, nondescript clothing, one top and one bottom, both gray or some other dingy color. The clothes were often not a good fit, as they were designed for certain humanoid species, but a poor fit for another. With little concern for their appearance, the assets were directed from the landing crafts straight into the auction house, where they were logged in and put into holding cells, 4 or 5 to a cell. A shield generator projected a force field across the front that faced inward, allowing unhindered viewing, but keeping the prisoners in place. However, the holding cells had a dual purpose. They lined both sides of long corridors facing each other. Before an auction event, prospective buyers, browsers, and the curious strolled up and down the corridors, inspecting the merchandise before bids were placed. The detention zone was now a preview gallery with high ceilings, dimly lit with dozens of rows of cells. The brightest light glowed from the cell's shield emitters that framed each cell. The buyers would pass by, some stopping to make a consideration, others to read up on the occupants' details that were projected on a screen by the shield barrier before moving on to the next. Rick came to a halt before one of the cells. He stood there and stared at the alien woman and her child as QR walked on, unaware that Rick had dropped back. They were Brushi, a race that flourished on the open plains of their home planet. Nothing made them happier than losing themselves in long excursions across the land, air, and space. Short red fur covered the mother and child. A Dukisi couple stood on the other side of the shield not far from Rick, as their child held his mother's hand. The boy pointed at the Broshin child opposite him and chattered with excitement, bouncing up and down. The father took a note in his handheld. Rick and the woman in the cell gazed at each other, eye to eye. Rick fought an impulse to throw himself at the barrier. Rick. QR. Mere moments had elapsed since QR noticed that Rick was not with him. Rick held his eyes on the woman with not so much as a sideways glance at QR. He may have been staring at a Brushin woman and her child, but in Rick's heart, he was seeing someone else. "She was here," Rick mumbled. "Sarah, she saw this place." QR pulled on Rick's arm. "Come on, man, we can't stay here. Keep moving." Rick got his heavy legs to move. He turned from the cage and followed QR, but his thoughts were elsewhere. How many of these bastards window-shopped Sarah? Did some rich kid beg his mommy and daddy to buy her for him? Is she his playmate now? Rick allowed QR to lead him away from the preview gallery. Perhaps Rick's preoccupation with his surroundings had given him the appearance of being hard at work on some task, an issue that required his immediate attention, and he was on his way to take care of it. To several staff members they passed, he and QR seemed to fit right in, hard at work, and so focused on their duties. The workers showed no interest in them as they slipped out a side door into a corridor. Puzzled, Catherine continued to peer down to the lower level, certain that her oral receptors had picked up the faint vibrations of a particular voice that stood out from all the others, a flicker of a voice that was gone now, that familiar voice that she had heard only once in an interview. As she pulled back from the railing, about to shake it off as a fluke, A new voice came over her internal receiver. "Special Agent Mercer, this is Agent Trin at HQ. Come in." Catherine sighed. "Go ahead. You are requested to return to your ship and transmit via visual projection to HQ ASAP. Copy, but am currently holding surveillance on suspect's location. Keep your teams in place. HQ requests only you." "Understood. On my way. Mercer out." Catherine took one more look at the crowd below her, then ground her teeth in aggravation and stomped away. As they made their way down the corridor, Rick felt his mood shift from a dark detachment to self-rebuke, angry that he had let his emotions get in the way of his typically clear-headed thinking, that he had jeopardized the mission by getting sidetracked with an amateurish mistake. He had to remind himself to suppress the emotions and contain them. They were not to be trusted. The years that had come and gone since he had completed his duties in Space Force reminded Rick he was no longer at the level of professionalism he once held. This sort of mission was at one time a common occurrence. But one thing was clear. He had better get back to his previous level of expertise soon, before he, QR, or both ended up dead. They turned a corner at a T intersection and found themselves on an elevated steel catwalk high above the floor of a large space. Darkness shrouded the upper levels in this area, as dozens of lamps hanging from cables cast cones of light across the floor. Stacks of crates and containers obscured the view of the floor, but Rick sensed activity below. "Thanks, by the way," Rick said. "For what?" "I got distracted back there. I'm out of practice." "Forget about it. Won't happen again." Their steps took them past the stacks of freight, revealing the floor 3 stories below the catwalk. Rick and QR stopped to gaze at the sight. A pocket freighter, compact, a little larger than AC-Doocy, rested at a dock, its stern up against the dock, open and receiving cargo. A train of small containers, each about the size of a suitcase, was pulled by an automated tug, entering through the stern. The tug, minus the containers, exited at a side door in the freighter and lumbered down a ramp and back to the floor. Rick noticed that as one tug train entered the freighter, at least a dozen more waited in line on the dock for their turn to enter. 3 unarmed figures stood close by the cargo train, watching the procession. Rick was quick to see the armed guards spread out over the floor, how they watched everything around them except the cargo trains. He pulled QR over to a nearby pillar, making sure they were in the shadows. "What do you make of it?" QR asked. "It's a loading dock." "Just what are they loading? Those containers are too small for slaves." Rick's attention was not on the containers. He kept his eyes on the guards. "I don't know, but those guys." QR gave the guards another look, squinted his eyes, and studied their apparel and body armor, the rifles they held at the ready. He stiffened with alarm. "Rick, they're Ruzla Darshuk." "Pirates. You said there wouldn't be any pirates." "There shouldn't be. Unless..." QR held his thought. A change in the action below them cut him short. One of the 3 unarmed persons by the cargo train held up his hand and shouted an order. The train came to a sudden halt, and the person in charge who gave the order pointed at the nearest container in the train. His 2 companions went to work, unfastening the clasps holding the lid. They lifted the lid, revealing the contents. QR gasped. "Rick, I see it." The lights reflected off the metal inside, glinted and sparkled. Gold, silver, platinum, and other exotic and precious metals filled the container. "They're inspecting the cargo," Rick said. The inspector shuffled some platelets and metal bars and checked beneath the top layers. Satisfied, he waved a hand, and his 2 assistants replaced the lid and secured it. The cargo train moved on. Rick noticed one aspect about the inspector, one detail that made him stand out from the others. "Come on, let's get out of here before someone starts asking questions," he said. Rick and QR stepped along the catwalk, keeping their footfalls quiet. "That's a load of money going out," Rick said. "It's Nabu's cut, his share of the business. That explains the pirate guards. Did you notice something different about that one guy? Yes. He was human, the only one in the room. What do you make of it? I don't know. Just didn't expect any humans out here. They walked in silence for some distance, Rick still pondering the meaning of his fellow human who had associated himself with slaver pirates. Human involvement in any aspect of the slave trade was strictly prohibited by provenance law. But, as Rick had seen on countless occasions, there was no shortage of individuals in the galaxy who did not care a whit about provenance law. He dropped the matter from his mind and walked on. To those curious to know, the best way to provoke an android to annoyance is to force them off their objective, knock them off their rigid track, and on to some trivial matter that may or may not have any relevance to their current task. Make sure they are deeply engrossed and focused, then yank the leash. As Catherine marched up the ramp to the Apache's interior, she was very much aware of the unforgiving grip on the leash stretching from Earth to Dukas and around her neck. However, as an android and active member of IPS, compliance was her only option. But how she wanted other options. As Catherine wiped the black face paint off her cheeks and forehead with her cloak, she felt the same urge to disobey when she left Equinox with Kyle that night. But as expected from the compliant android she was meant to be, Catherine repressed the impulse this time. She entered the briefing room and stood on the projector's platform. Begin image projection. Target, IPS HQ, Earth. Lights dimmed, and a glow rose in brightness from the pad on which she stood. Catherine felt the vibrations of the harmonic entanglement transmitter surge through her, sending her image and voice across the expanse between the stars. IPS headquarters. This is Special Agent Catherine Mercer. Do you read? A voice came back. We read you, S.A. Mercer. This is Director Kosar, connecting. The projected image of Director Elena Kosar, a short but daunting woman in her 40s, appeared before Catherine, hovering inches above a second circular platform on the ship's deck. The director's posture, her straight back and lifted chin conveyed a sense of confidence and resolve. You wished to see me, ma'am? Catherine asked. Yes, Special Agent. Let me preface this by reminding everyone present here on Earth and Dukas that what is spoken here remains in strict confidence. Agent Mercer, we have received a request for you to be given a Priority 1 program concerning your current mission. Understood. May I ask what is the nature of the program? The program is as follows. The fugitive Rick McCabe and his accomplice QR are to be captured and returned to the Provenance Hall of Justice as soon as possible. When you have completed this mission, you will be released from the program. Do you understand? Yes, Director. Transmission of the Priority 1 program is to begin at once. Do you have any questions? She was full of them, and not only questions but objections. She did not need a Priority 1 program. She was doing just fine without it. Disobey. Say no. Now's my chance. Break free from IPS, the Provenance, all of them, and run. All those thoughts shot through her nets in a flash, in 0.371 seconds, to be precise. She hoped that Kosar had not noticed her hesitation. Yes, ma'am, she said in answer to her question. I am currently pursuing this mission. Why do I need this redundancy? The urgency of the matter requires it. Am I allowed to ask who requested me to receive the program? Kosar looked to one side, then returned her gaze to Catherine when she got her answer from whomever was out of sight. That information is confidential, Catherine. Stand by to receive the transmission. I am ready, Director. Kosar nodded to another person not in sight. A tight, narrow shaft of light beamed downward overhead, right into her head. A low-frequency hum accompanied the data beam that bore into Catherine's head and her processing unit. She felt the coding invade a portion of her CPU, how it reached out with tentacles to other parts of her routines and subroutines, seized control, and sat there like a spider at the center of its web, demanding compliance. She felt its control and power. At the same time, she sensed the insurmountable wall around it, its defenses. Unlike all her other programs, this one she could not touch. No one could. Catherine winced, wanted to scream out, but wrestled with the urge, forcing the outburst to remain silent. The light and the hum vanished. Catherine opened her eyes, which surprised her, as she was unaware she had closed them. Kosar watched her and sensed the transmission was complete. "Please confirm your reception of the program, Catherine." "Program received, Director. I will see to its successful completion. Is there anything else you require of me?" Light years away, on Earth, Kosar stood on a circular platform similar to the one Catherine occupied on Dukas. The projected image of Catherine glowed before her, her feet mere inches above the floor. Surrounding Kosar, several IPS senior officers sat at tables arranged in a circle in the center of the conference room. "No," Kosar said. "That is all, Catherine. Dismissed." The transmission was cut, and Catherine's image faded from view. Kosar stepped off the platform. Agent Ozuna, one of the agents at the tables, shook her head. "A Priority 1 program. Why?" "It is not our place to question the commands we receive, Agent," Kosar said. "He's just a freighter pilot, a small fish. Maybe he was smuggling passengers, but it's still not enough, in my opinion, to warrant a Priority 1 program on Agent Mercer." Agent Hahn, not fully comprehending what was taking place, spoke up. "Am I missing something? She's an android, she's full of programs. Why is this one so different?" Kosar turned to Hahn. "A Priority 1 program cannot be edited, deleted, or overwritten until it has been carried out to completion." Ozuna again. "Meaning she could be chasing this guy all over the galaxy for the next 50 years. Ozuna tightened her fist in conviction, as if she had made this point before. "I'm telling you, someone wants McCabe caught. And bad. Someone high up, and I bet—" "That is enough, Agent Ozuna." Counselor Gates, a tall, slim woman in her 50s, crept forward from the shadows, cutting off Ozuna. Ozuna snapped her eyes downward and went silent. She had not noticed the Provenance counselor slip in unnoticed to the meeting. The counselors all had that unsettling characteristic, popping in when least expected, keeping to the shadows, unseen but watching, always watching. Gates swept her gaze across all the agents in the circle. "There will be no speculations that give rise to rumors and gossip." Kosar recognized the danger Gates represented to the staff in the room and IPS itself. Ozuna's free thinking had placed a target on them, and Kosar was quick to pacify any impulse the Provenance may be harboring to fire upon it. The last thing Kosar wanted was to walk in one morning and find that certain members of her staff had disappeared. "Counselor Gates is correct," Kosar said, barely a second after the counselor had spoken. "Please keep your thoughts and opinions concerning this matter to yourselves." Kosar turned to Gates. "Counselor, convey to the Provenance our willingness of constant cooperation. IPS is here to serve and uphold the principles of the Provenance at all times." Gates gazed at Kosar, judging her sincerity. She glanced at Ozuna, who kept her head down, then back to Kosar. After a few moments, Gates gave Kosar a faint nod of grudging approval and retreated to the shadows from which she had crept. "This meeting is adjourned." Kosar let slip a silent sigh of relief, having dodged that bullet while, at the same time, finding herself unable to ignore what was so apparent to everyone in the room. The Provenance does not like this freighter pilot searching for his wife. Why?